Tonight on the Worldview Report, an Axios exclusive reveals that when President Trump asked Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office how he was doing in the polls ahead of Israel's October 27th election, Netanyahu paused. One of his aides lied, said he was winning, and Trump has still not given him the endorsement that Netanyahu was counting on. Kushner and Netanyahu clashed directly in Monday's meeting over Israel's special mission to hunt down and kill every October 7th terrorist, with Kushner insisting strikes be limited to imminent threats only, and Netanyahu refusing. President Trump posted on Truth Social that there are no talks planned with Iran and none are scheduled. Iran's top negotiator says the Strait of Hormuz stays shut until all memorandum of understanding conditions are met, and a ship is struck by an unknown projectile while transiting the strait. President Trump threatens to bomb Oman. In markets, they respond with oil spiking and borrowing costs hitting multiple decade highs. The ACLU files a 314-page petition asking the U.S. Supreme Court to strike down the new Texas law requiring the Ten Commandments to be displayed in every public schoolroom. And Democratic Socialist Angie Nixon, a DSA member who recently joined the organization, upsets Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman in Florida's Democratic Senate primary by 16 points, despite being outspent 16-1. And in tonight's commentary, as I was watching at 8:30 this morning, I saw a financial event hit that very few people in the conservative media are talking about. Deutsche Bank FX researcher George Servalas, he's warning that conditions have not looked like this since 2007. Kevin Warsh and the Fed, they are at maximum size with nowhere to go. I'll explain what technology giants losing liquidity means for the paychecks of the ordinary Americans watching this broadcast tonight. All that and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. We begin tonight with a politically explosive Axios exclusive by Barak Ravid that could reshape the Israeli election scheduled for October 27th. When Benjamin Netanyahu met President Trump in the Oval Office 2 weeks ago, President Trump reportedly asked him directly how he was doing in the polls. Netanyahu is said to have paused. Then one of his advisors stepped in. Mr. President, he is winning, the aide reportedly said. And again, that's according to a U.S. official familiar with the exchange. Netanyahu is not winning. His governing coalition is currently projected at between 48 and 49 Knesset seats, well below the 61 seats needed to form a majority government. And President Trump has not given him the endorsement he has been hoping for, despite being asked about it repeatedly by reporters. Trump told Fox News he may endorse someone, but added that it is most appropriate for me to stay out of Israeli elections, a phrase that itself signals which way the wind is blowing. The standard Trump endorsement formula is complete and total endorsement by absolute backing, and that did not appear. Axios reports that Netanyahu's political opponents, they have been working through back channels to persuade Trump allies and donors to keep the American president neutral. The opposition figures include former Prime Ministers Bennett and Lapid and former IDF chief Issakat, all of whom have reached out to Trump associates, urging him not to back Netanyahu. President Trump has publicly told Netanyahu not to launch further strikes in Lebanon and has signaled repeatedly that Washington and Jerusalem do not see eye to eye on every issue. Whether President Trump eventually steps in with a formal endorsement could become the defining external factor in an Israeli election that's already closer than Netanyahu's team is letting on. Our next story comes from World Israel News, and it reveals the central point of contention in Jared Kushner's Monday meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu that reportedly produced no agreement and was followed almost immediately by a major Israeli airstrike. Israel has established a special mission to hunt down and kill every single Palestinian terrorist involved in the October 7th, 2023 massacre. That mission has been generating strikes against Hamas operatives across Gaza on a regular basis. The main dispute in Monday's Kushner-Netanyahu meeting was over whether those strikes should continue. Kushner told Netanyahu that the U.S. would not oppose Israeli strikes against individuals who pose a genuine, imminent threat to Israeli forces. But he told Netanyahu the imminent threat standard should not be broadly interpreted. That's according to an official present at the meeting. Netanyahu's position was clear and unwavering. The strikes against October 7th participants will continue regardless. No agreement reportedly was reached. Hours after Kushner left Israel, the IDF carried out one of its deadliest strikes in months, targeting what it described as a gathering of senior Hamas operatives at a Gaza cafe. 4 Hamas fighters, the same elite force that led the October 7th ground assault, were killed. So were 2 others, including a child. Following day, the IDF struck a Hamas police station, killing 9 officers, including a 13-year-old girl. The Board of Peace has remained silent on both strikes. Netanyahu's position that every October 7th participant will be killed if maintained and executed consistently, well, it could go against the terms of Trump's 20-point Gaza plan, which Netanyahu accepted last September and which does not explicitly carve out exceptions for pre-October 7th targeted killings. Our next story comes from Reuters. The 60-day Memorandum of Understanding, it expired on Monday, and the ceasefire along with it. A senior Iranian official told Reuters that Iran was moving to a fully offensive military posture. And on Tuesday, Trump posted on Truth Social that there are no talks or conversations going on, nor are they scheduled with the Islamic Republic of Iran. A flat reversal of what he had been saying just days earlier. Iran's top negotiator, Mohammad Ghalibaf, he said in state media that the Strait of Hormuz would remain shut until the U.S. met the conditions of the June 17th Memorandum of Understanding, including lifting all oil sanctions, ending the naval blockade, and releasing frozen assets. The United Kingdom's maritime trade operations confirmed that a vessel was struck by an unknown projectile while transiting the strait outbound on Tuesday, causing engine room damage and a crew casualty. President Trump simultaneously claimed on Truth Social that the strait is open and operating. Preliminary shipping data, it showed single-digit crossings on Monday. Trump also told a Fox News reporter that if Oman gets in the way of U.S. efforts in the strait, well, we'll bomb the blank out of them. A threat that rattled one of the few remaining neutral mediators in the region. He also posted a Truth Social image showing the Strait of Hormuz labeled New U.S. Territory, building on his threat from the previous week to declare the strait an American territory after Iran's surrender. The markets responded immediately. Oil prices spiked. Stocks, they sagged. And borrowing costs for major economies, including the United States, hit what Reuters described as a multi-decade high. Concerns about this long-term inflationary and the fiscal impact of the crisis, well, it's now showing up in bond yields, credit spreads, and consumer confidence all at the same time. We'll be right back after this short break. Friends, this is Brandon House. For more than a year now, I've been teaching through the book of Revelation, and the response from you has been overwhelming. You've asked me again and again, when are you going to put this study in print? We want to mark it up. We want to share it with our families. Well, it's here. My brand new 2-volume commentary on the book of Revelation, verse by verse, chapter by chapter. This is not a watered down, allegorized replacement theology approach to Revelation. This is a literal, grammatical, historical study, the way the Lord intended his word to be read. And I connect the prophecy of Revelation to the headlines you're watching unfold right now, the rise of global government and the convergence of end-time events the Lord Jesus warned us about. Folks, we are living in serious days, and there has never been a more important time to understand what God has told us about what is coming. Get your 2-volume Revelation commentary today at worldviewstore.com. That's worldviewstore.com.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
Welcome back from the break. Thanks for being with us tonight and every night, and for remembering we are a listener-supported network, and you can do so at worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. You also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail, worldviewfoundation.com. Don't forget about the opportunity to be a legacy giver. Please consider going to Worldview Foundation and reading up on how you can leave the Worldview Foundation in your estate plans. Many families have done that, and it's a great way to give the legacy of a biblical worldview. As we continue now in my 36 years of, doing just that, defending the truth of a biblical worldview. Started with my first book in 1990. So again, please consider legacy giving. All the details are there at worldviewfoundation.com. And Revelation Volume 1, 2, and 3, they're off to the printer. And if you'd like to be guaranteed to receive all 3 volumes by this fall, then I would consider right now, if I were you, checking it out at worldviewstore.com and getting in your pre-order. Because again, these volumes now, well over 500 sets sold. And if we sell out, then it'll take 5 to 6 weeks to get the next print run done. So if you would like to give these as a gift for someone this coming Christmas, you might want to consider getting your pre-order in. Worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. Revelation, it's a layman's commentary. I describe it as commentary meets Tom Clancy, because I just loaded up with all kinds of news stories that I think shows the stage setting that's going on with so much described in Revelation. So again, worldviewstore.com is where you'll find all the details, worldviewstore.com. And then, of course, our national conference is coming up Friday night, October 23rd, Saturday, October 24th, over 900 seats now spoken for at the Waukesha Expo Center. We'd love to have you be there. It's free, but you must have a ticket. We'll take a free will offering a couple times to offset cost. Please consider going now and getting your ticket at worldviewtube.com/events. We have a lower third for that. worldviewtube.com/events. There it is, right there. All right. Oh, and by the way, you might want to consider our vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and our brand new Worldview and Bible software program where you can ask it a question and it'll answer it from our quarantined database of 36 years of radio shows, TV shows, ebooks, audiobooks, conferences, and more. Answers from great Bible teachers like Dr. John Whitcomb, Dr. Rob Linstead, Andy Woods, and so many more. Jimmy D. Young, Ron Carlson, some of these guys who are not even with us anymore, but their ministry continues because when you ask the Worldviewpedia, a research assistant, a question, it's going to bring up what is in our database from the last 36 years. And we're constantly adding to it literally every day. So worldviewtube.com/vault for more details. Our next story comes from Zero Hedge, and it covers a religious liberty case that's heading toward the U.S. Supreme Court with the potential to become one of the most consequential First Amendment rulings in a generation. The American Civil Liberties Union, they filed a 314-page petition with the U.S. Supreme Court on August 17th, asking the justices to review and overturn a Texas law known as Senate Bill 10. It requires every public elementary and secondary school classroom in the state to display an easily readable poster or framed copy of the Ten Commandments. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit upheld the Texas law in April in a 9-8 decision, which is one of the most closely divided rulings possible at the court. The Fifth Circuit's majority said the Texas law looks nothing like a historical religious establishment because it does not tell houses of worship what to believe, how to worship, or whom to employ. It does not punish those who reject the Ten Commandments. It doesn't impose taxes to support clergy or require churches to perform civic functions. The ACLU's petition argues the exact opposite, stating that the question of whether a state may impose scripture on impressionable, captive audience, that's children, for nearly every hour of every school day for up to 13 years, well, it implicates the most fundamental guarantees of the First Amendment. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton defended the law, calling it a major victory for Texas and our moral values. It's a great bill, I think, coming out of Texas, and more states seem to be duplicating it. So this Supreme Court decision, well, it could set precedents. We'll be watching it because, as I said, the ruling could shape the legal landscape for religious expression in public schools across the country. The court is likely to hear arguments next fall. Our next story comes from The Guardian, and it represents the biggest single Democratic primary upset of the entire 2026 election cycle. Florida State Representative Angie Nixon, a Democratic socialist who recently joined the DSA, that's the Democrat Socialists of America, defeated a retired lieutenant colonel by the name of Alexander Vindman. That was in the Florida Democratic Senate primary, and she did so by 56.1% to 43.9%. She will now face Republican Senator Ashley Moody, appointed to fill Marco Rubio's seat. And this will happen, of course, in November's general election. The upset, it was stunning on every measure because Vindman, he raised more than $16 million, roughly 16 times that of Nixon, who came in at approximately $975,000. He had national name recognition as the Army officer whose public testimony about Trump's phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky helped drive Trump's first impeachment. He was so confident of victory that he had scheduled a fundraiser on the island of Nantucket the Sunday before the primary. He had the backing of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee as well. Well, Nixon won on grassroots, volunteers, and her signature hot pink wardrobe. She drove herself to events across the state. She relied on union members and door knockers and focused on kitchen table issues, including health care and child care costs. The context, well, it makes this even more striking. Vindman, he is a Kiev-born Jewish refugee from the former Soviet Union, whose family fled socialism. Nixon is the first DSA candidate to win a Senate primary in 2026, with all other socialist successors at the federal level confined to House races. She has pushed pro-Palestinian legislation at the state level and has advocated for what she calls de-escalation of the conflict with Iran. Nixon, she now faces, as I said, Ashley Moody in a state that Trump won by 13 percentage points back in 2024. Democrats, they have not held a Florida Senate seat since 2019. Well, now it is time for our nightly Worldview Report commentary. At 8:30 this morning, the United States Treasury did something it does not do without a reason. It stepped into the bond market and it announced it would become a much bigger buyer of its own long-term debt. Treasury Secretary said it's increasing the maximum size of its liquidity support buyback operations for longer-dated securities by at least double, from $2 billion per operation to at least $4 billion per operation. That covers the 10 to 20-year and the 20 to 30-year portions of the market. It takes effect September 9th and runs through November 4th. The market reaction, it was immediate. The 30-year Treasury bond yield dropped more than 9 basis points to about 5.19%. The 10-year note, well, that fell about 4.65%. Stock futures, they jumped, and gold broke out to the upside. Now, why does a government suddenly announce it's going to start buying its own bonds? Because nobody else wants them. On Tuesday, the 30-year yield, it hit 5.33%. That's the highest level since June of 2007. CNBC reports the long end of the market has seen what traders call a buyer's strike since late June. That's the story behind the story. Because when yields go up, it means bond prices are going down. And bond prices go down when demand dries up. The world is being asked to lend this country money for 30 years, and the world's starting to say, not at that price. Axios laid out the reasons this week, and I want you to hear them because they're not complicated. One, well, of course, deficits are getting worse. The Congressional Budget Office last week raised its expectation for the annual federal deficit budget to be $2.1 trillion, $200 billion higher than it was projected to be back in February. Number two, competition for capital from the artificial intelligence build-out. That's going on. The technology giants, they've sold an enormous volume of corporate bonds in order to fund their data centers. And some of those companies, well, like Microsoft among them, they now carry better credit ratings than the United States government. So investors are buying that paper instead of ours, the government's. Three, there's uncertainty about the new Federal Reserve Chairman, Kevin Warsh. A bond strategist at the Bank of America told Axios there is a price to be paid for the lack of guidance. And the price is higher interest rates and a higher cost to the taxpayer. Read that list again. Washington cannot stop spending. Corporate America is outborrowing the sovereign. And the buyers, well, they're nervous. So the seller of the bonds has decided to become the buyer of the bonds. Let me tell you what the professionals are calling this. Deutsche Bank's head of foreign exchange research, George Sarvelas, he put out a note within minutes calling the move a soft form of financial repression and saying that it is structurally very similar to the Federal Reserve's old Operation Twist. In other words, he pointed out the obvious mechanics. The Treasury has to issue more short-term bills to pay for taking the long-term duration out of the market. So nothing is retired. Nothing is paid off. Wealth partners, well, they said it plainly, that this is not a debt paydown. It's a rearrangement of the maturity schedule. In other words, the government swaps 30-year obligations for short-term paper that has to be rolled over again and again and again. It is refinancing the national credit card at the moment the interest rate is climbing and calling it liquidity support. Zero Hedge called it, what it looks like, quantitative easing light. That means expanding the balance sheet. That means more inflation. The argument is that Treasury buybacks were always a soft form of quantitative easing, and that this announcement, arriving with total federal debt approaching now $40 trillion, well, that settles the debate. But watch what the dollar did, and watch what gold did. Because here's the part that touches your kitchen table. Deutsche Bank's warning is that if the price of Treasury bonds is not allowed to fall to where the market says it should fall, then the adjustment has to happen somewhere else. And it happens in the currency. The dollar takes the hit instead. That's not a Wall Street abstraction. That's the purchasing power of your paycheck, your pension, and your grandchildren's savings account. Folks, this is what financial repression means. It is the quiet policy of holding interest rates below where an honest market would set them so that the government can keep borrowing more and more. Well, the loss, that spreads silently across everybody who holds dollars. This is the hidden tax of inflation. And nobody gets to vote on it. Nobody signs a bill. There's no debate on the floor of the Senate. It just gets announced at 8:30 in the morning in a press release about liquidity. And it's over before most Americans have even finished their first cup of coffee. John Maynard Keynes, he said it. By this continuous process of inflation, we can steal the majority of the people's wealth. And not one man in a million will know what we're doing. Folks, we have a country about to hit this week or next $40 trillion in on-record debt, not counting off-record debt. We're servants, managing our servitude. Diluting the money is what they're doing, and then hoping that you don't notice. It's theft. So, do not confuse a lower yield with a solved problem. A patient whose fever breaks because you gave him an aspirin is still sick. And the debt, it didn't shrink today. It just got shuffled around. And the bill, it's still going to come due. And again, I don't give financial advice. I give financial opinion. But some folks who don't take action are going to find their savings account and life's work debased, diminished. I think we're headed toward life-altering inflation. You can do your due diligence and do something about it now, or you can wait and have to alter your life. That does it for this edition of the Worldview Report. Until next time, may God save America. Take care.